Delighted now that Aengus Kennedy of Nature Northwest is with us and with us in the studio, which is the first time in well since forever, which is great, Aengus. So welcome along.
Thanks very much, John. It's nice to be back face to face.
Yeah, absolutely, and nice to see a bit of good weather as well. We're going to chat about the outdoors, so it's nice to see just kind of looking out the window there, seeing just blue sky.
Yeah, it's lovely. It's really warm there. The car was reading 19 degrees there a minute ago, and it feels more than that. We're finally getting a bit of the heat. They're getting blasted with heat in Europe. My goodness, the heat waves there are ferocious. We need to remind ourselves of that on the greyer days and the cooler days. We're lucky where we are, really. But today is just gorgeous.
Yeah, because we keep on about it'd be great to get a good spell, and it would be great to get a nice sunny spell, and get out and make the most of the beaches and all the rest of it. But overall, we can't complain. If we were sitting in Spain or France at the moment, we would have plenty to complain about.
Well, in
it's
Spain,
the other extreme.
Yeah, and in Spain they're rationing the air conditioning because the amount of power that's been used, people are using too much power, too much electricity to try and keep themselves cool and it's kind of a vicious circle. When it gets to a certain heat, well, then they need to cut back on the energy use and the rest of it. So there's a lot of people suffering there. So we should be grateful, and it's also something we need as a country to be planning for in the future. We need to be looking at our water reserves for when we do have droughts. We saw the fodder crisis a couple of years ago that we had, and we need to be putting our own plans in place for that. But that heat is very damaging for nature, not just for people. The swifts in Spain and south of France are in ferocious trouble. A lot of the swifts are unfortunate. It's very sad to see and to read about. But the chicks are throwing themselves out of their nests. They tend to nest high up in buildings and eaves of buildings, and it just gets too hot. Once the temperature goes over 40 degrees, it's too hot for them. They can't cool down like we can. They can't perspire like we can. They're more like a dog. They pant, and they can only get out so much heat by panting. So the chicks are throwing themselves out of the nest before they can fly, and of course they can't lift themselves off the ground, and they're very vulnerable.
And they're in small confined spaces, so it heats up, I suppose, a lot quicker.
Yeah, an awful lot quicker, tiny little spaces. And normally that wasn't an issue. You might get these great heats a little bit later on in Spain and France and whatnot, but not this early in the year. And normally by the time those heat waves would kick in and the big temperatures would kick in, the swifts would be in the air, they'd be flying. So that's where they're getting into bother.
How long does it take for them to be able to fly? How many weeks?
It takes about 4 weeks. And Swifts are quite incredible. They have the opposite problem up here sometimes is a summer storm might come or some bad weather might come, and the parents mightn't be able to get enough food. And swifts are known to fly around storm systems. So they can sense the weather that's there, they can sense the air pressure, it's believed, that's there. And if a bad enough storm is coming, they will take to the air and they'll just fly around it, which is quite amazing, the parents. So the chicks are able to go into a kind of torpor, kind of like a half hibernation thing, where all their body function slows right down. So it means they're using very little energy, so they can survive for a few days without food, basically, until those parents come back, the weather gets better, the insects are on the wing again. So they're an incredible bird.
They are an incredible bird indeed. Their name actually in Latin translates as without feet, and they don't really need feet. I know you've chatted about them before on the show, but they live in the sky. They don't land.
They don't land, and people often talk about something that's not of this earth, and I think when it comes to nature, the swift is probably closest to that. And because the swifts that you'll see in towns all over Donegal at the moment, in Letterkenny, in Donegal town, in Ramelton, in Milford, and so many different places, up in Inishowen Peninsula as well, they haven't landed since last year, since they left their nest sites last year. So they leave their nest site after the few weeks and take to the air, and then after another couple of weeks of hanging around and being fed and learning and training how to hunt insects in the air, they then head off with their parents off to Africa.
Yeah,
and they fly around Africa, and they do not land for about 10 months.
Because they come here at the end of May, and then they go at the end of August, so they're only here for a few months.
Oh, only here for a few weeks, really. Yeah, that's it. It's very, very short time. So it's purely just here to breed. And insects is what they eat, and nothing but insects. And they're assigned to the amount of insect life that is out there and is high above our heads that we don't know of. So many spiders, for instance, distribute themselves or spread around the place by launching up into the air on a windy day. And then all the different midges and all the different kind of flies that we see in the evening time.
That's what they feed on.
That's what they're feeding on. They're able to drink in the air, so they catch raindrops in the air. They catch their nesting material in the air. So if you get to see one of the webcams that has cameras on a swift nest, you'll see little feathers and little bits of cobwebs and bits of dust that they've gathered from the air to line their nest. It's quite incredible.
And they often fly in twos or maybe fours.
Yeah, so they'll stick in little groups. And they won't breed until they're at least 2 years old, possibly 3 years old. So swifts have been watched for generations and generations. But there's big interest in them now because they're so beautiful, they're so amazing, and also the numbers are in decline. So there's a lot of studying going on. So they call the swifts that aren't breeding but are checking out the sites, and you'll see swifts in the towns now. You'll see them flying right up, high up onto the eaves of a building, but they won't go in. They'll go up, they'll look, and they'll fly away, and they'll look, and they'll fly away. They call those swifts the bangers because they seem to bang against the edge of the building. Just checking out a nest site and getting familiar with a nest site.
Right.
And then in another year or two, they'll be old enough to breed and they'll use that little nest site.
And when they do find a place to nest, they come back there every year to the same place.
Every year. And if you have had the eaves repaired on your house, so blocking up any little holes, because they'll go just underneath the roof, underneath the tiles kind of thing, that's where they go. And if you have that repaired, like a lot of older buildings are getting repaired at the moment, they will come back for at least 4 years attempting to go to the same site. They're very faithful to the same site, and the site kind of is stuck in their head, you know. And
the fact that they come back here to breed, I suppose, you know, the swifts would be calling this their home, and we should see this as a home for swifts.
Absolutely. This is their home, and so they're Irish swifts. They head off elsewhere and they fly around elsewhere following the seasons looking for bugs, but they don't even land anywhere else. The only place that they touch solid, anything solid, is in Ireland, is here. I think it's on us to make sure that for the few weeks that they do come, we make sure we provide a habitat, so somewhere for them to breed, and also that there's enough food there for them.
Well, that's the two problems: their habitat and their food. The food, because intensive farming practices have improved over the year, become more intensive, and they have less food. And then their habitat, their numbers have actually declined over 40% in the last 15 years. So that is, you know, that's a shocking statistic. And it's because our building methods have become modern as well, and they don't have as many wee nooks and crannies, and there's not as many old buildings. They've been, you know, refurbished or knocked down, so they have less places to nest.
Less places to nest, and sometimes when we hear these stories, people can feel a bit hopeless, and they think, "Oh, this is a disaster." You know, the numbers are going down so quickly, but there is things that we can all do. And you mentioned intensive farming. In Donegal, we're lucky the way that our landowners look after the land to a large extent. An awful lot of the hedgerows in so many parts of Donegal are still healthy. They're alive, they're well, they're thriving, and that gives a home to insect life. And that's so important, keeping that network of hedgerows and little damp patches and ponds and whatnot where it's possible to do on your land, be it in your garden or your farm. But we do that to a large extent. One of the reasons that swifts come back here to Donegal. But then for the homeowners in towns, if you are getting repairs done to your house, which is you're perfectly entitled to do, and put up some swift boxes. And you'll find plans for them online. You'll find plans for them on my own website. I'll direct towards some easy plans, and they're really easy to make.
You can buy them from Birdwatch Ireland.
Or you can buy them, and you just fit them underneath the eaves, and the bird doesn't make a mess, doesn't chew any wires, doesn't do any of that kind of thing. But you'll be helping conserve a bird, and that's in big trouble.
If you put in one of these bird boxes, are they noisy? When they're here, are they very noisy?
A little bit. They're sometimes called a screaming swift. So as they're flying, they make an amazing screaming sound, and people will probably be familiar with that. They're like the swallows and like the house martins that come, and the swallows that go into the barn, and the house martin that builds the little mud house on the edge of your building. But these guys are all black, and they're even faster than those characters, and you'll hear their high-pitched sound. Their high-pitched calling sound. But at night time, they don't call, they don't make any noise, and they won't be moving around the nest nearly as much as, say, starlings or sparrows might be if they were under the eaves of your house. So they're not as noisy as a lot of other birds that would nest. Once they're in the box, you'll hardly know they're there. But the sound of them, anytime I'm watching a TV program that features something in the Mediterranean, I'll often smile because I'll hear the swifts in the background. There's just such a huge sound to that kind of habitat. And it's a sound that should be so common here in Ireland, but it's slowly slipping away.
So if we're building or renovating, we're not going to leave a little hole here or there just so swifts can get in. So the answer is a special bird box.
A special bird box. So
box.
some countries in Europe, it's the law. You have to put in what they call swift bricks, and they're hollow bricks. So right up at the very top, just where the
ideally
roof,
north facing.
yeah, north facing. Absolutely, yeah. Although they will go into all sorts of different sides, but north works for them. And you'd put in a couple of these little hollow bricks right up at the top underneath the roof. If you were building a house from scratch or doing some major repairs, if you were doing some smaller repairs, you can easily get the wooden boxes, and you can fit them in. If people want to see a bit more of them, if you look up the GMIT's website, and if you put into Google GMIT Swift boxes, and they have some live swift boxes which you can look at right now, and I think there's 3 swift nests currently live as we speak, and you can see these incredible little birds sitting in their little nest site, and that's the only time that they're touching anything solid.
Wonderful. Now, moving on from the swifts, according to a new study, restoring native predators like lynx cats could help invasive animals or keep invasive animals in check. For instance, the Sika deer has been listed as a great threat to global biodiversity. Now, this is thanks to research that was led by Queen's University in Belfast, and it says that reintroducing animals like lynx cats and maybe wolves in Europe could help to limit rabies as well. Now, it's a slightly controversial issue, rewilding. We're no ones to talk because it's been a huge success here in Donegal with the golden eagles, but putting in lynx or wolves straight away when you hear about the predators, you're going, oh, no, hold on a second here. Just let nature take care of itself.
Yeah, you're right. And I'd say it's more than slightly controversial. And sometimes conservation movements or environmental movements can shoot themselves in the foot a little bit by talking about these kind of projects, because people who mightn't be tuned into it, they'll link onto that, or they'll grab onto that, the idea of wolves in the hills or lynx in the hills, and they think of a dangerous kind of creature. What are these people talking about? But we forget, exactly as you say, the Golden Eagle Project has been successful. The White-tailed Eagle Project, very successful. Red kites have also been brought back. So we are reintroducing things. And when things are reintroduced, there's a lot of study, a lot of science put behind it, and you can't. There's a responsibility to the animals that you're reintroducing as well as everything else. So they can't be just brought back and kind of released and said, good luck, it seems like a good idea. Something like wolves and lynx, I can't see it happening. When wolves and lynx were in Ireland, well, wolves were in Ireland up until the 1700s, but Ireland was much more wooded. And you've got to remember that Ireland's natural state is woodland. An awful lot of Ireland was woodland and would turn back into woodland if it got the chance again.
So there wouldn't have been as many farm animals around then. There wouldn't have been as many sheep and cattle, for instance.
Nothing like. So the clash, and much less people too. So the clash between people and nature wasn't, wasn't as strong. The lynx has been gone for a very long time. And the lynx was more an ice age type stuff. Around about then, there hasn't been lynx in Ireland for an awful long time, really. And yes, in parts of the world they would be able to control deer. Our deer populations are climbing and climbing and climbing, and they don't have the natural predators. So it's up to the likes of the national parks to organise culls or to control the numbers in some way. But I think bringing in wildcats would be a step too far.
Okay.
At the moment, anyway.
Someone says grey lag geese along with baby geese have been seen in Creeslaw before the lake. As you come into Creeslaw, as you come in there on the left hand side, walking along the road, where would they have come from, or where would they be going?
Well, there's 2 big questions. It's great to see them. First, we get quite a few different species of geese that come and visit us in the wintertime, including grey lag. They come in their thousands from further north. They used to breed in Ireland in much bigger numbers, and the fact that we're seeing them on the side of the road in Creeslaw is a sign of how we look after nature to a certain extent anyway in Donegal, and because their numbers are rising. It's great to see. They will tend to breed in freshwater lakes. They'll tend to breed in anywhere that's kind of nice and close to water. So they must have had some kind of little lake that they were breeding in, and they're now on the way to try and find a bigger body of water for those chicks to keep them safe. Unusual to find them stuck in a town like that. But at this time of year, people will sometimes come across the likes of ducks. Ducks will do something similar. The mallards and whatnot, they will breed a little bit away from water, but the chicks are very resilient, and geese chicks are very resilient when they're hatched as well, and they're able to walk pretty much straight away. They're able to waddle along and head to that body of water where they'll be safe.
Recently, well, on a couple of occasions actually, we were coming back from our walk, and there's a pheasant just over the road from us, and well, I'm not saying it's tame, but you drive up, I slow down when I'd see it just to admire it, and then normally with a pheasant they'd be flighty and they'd take off the minute anything would come anywhere near them, but this one you drive up fairly close before it would move away.
Yeah, the pheasants, beautiful birds. And there's a couple of different species of pheasant in Ireland now. They're originally from Asia, from China, but they were brought in a long time ago, and they're bred now for hunting. And that isn't always necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes people think, hunting and shooting birds shouldn't be. However, quite often, certainly responsible gun clubs, they do a lot of good nature work, and they often create very good habitats which support many different types of species, including the pheasant, if that's what they're after. But the pheasants are fed, so they're fed and they're hand reared to a certain extent, or farmed at least. So the ones that escape, if they're released for a shoot, or if they've just escaped from the farm, they'll often be very tame. I know we have a pheasant that comes up to us and comes up to our chicken feeders, and goes right into the chicken feeders, and you can go, well, up to a few feet of it,
Okay, so that might explain it.
Yeah, and if they do come and join in with your chickens, enjoy them, but watch out in the evening time, because you'll see the chickens look on in amazement, because the pheasant will take off. They can fly, despite their dumpy kind of size and look. They're quite good flyers, quite strong flyers, and they can take off nearly straight up. It's amazing if they have to. And you'll see your chickens looking at them
enviously
in wonder as they go off to roost up in a tree.
Okay. Brilliant stuff, Aengus. Thanks a million, and thanks for coming in. naturenorthwest.ie for all sorts of information on what we've been chatting about and other things besides. And next time you come back, feel free to bring the good weather back with you.
I'll certainly try. Thanks, John. Great to be here.
Start playing NCBI Radio Bingo today. 3 chances a day.